Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Kickstarter Weekly. This week's edition is going to cover games that are completing their funding from January 10th through the 23rd. Now, this means two things. It means that there are games that would be covered in this video that would have funded during the previous week, except that there were no games that I wanted to share with you guys during last week, which means I did not produce one of these videos last week. And so this video is covering double duty. It's covering the period of last week and this week. Now, part of the reason that I did that was because I'm in the middle of producing a big 8-video series featuring my most anticipated games of 2022 that's covering 100 different new games and 50 expansions or reprints or second editions of other games. I already have my first 10 honorable mentions up in video number 1, and I cover all of the expansion content and the second edition or later editions of other games in the second and third videos, and those are already up. Which means I'm about to start the 5 videos that will each cover 20 of the 100 games in the 100 game list. And the first of those videos should be out almost about the same time that you see this. However, I do plan on getting this video produced first so that it can hopefully precede the end of the Blazon campaign. Another reason is I just didn't want to produce a video if I had no Kickstarters to talk to you guys about, and I thought the other things that I talk about in these videos, the played games, acquired games, and the games that I pledged, could easily be folded into the following week's video, which is exactly what I've done. So this video essentially covers 2 weeks, but there was nothing to share with you guys in that first week. There are 3 Kickstarter campaigns. One of them is actually on Gamefound that I'm going to be talking about later in this video. But before I get to those games, I'm going to talk to you about the 4 games that I've played this period. Now, that's essentially 9 different game sessions covering 4 different games, because one of these games I played 3 times and another game I played 4 times. But let's get to these 4 unique played games before we move on to the 3 currently running crowdfunding campaigns that I think you might want to know about before they end, and that I think you might want to consider backing. So my first played game this period is Anno 1800. I actually played it 3 times. I have played it at a 2-player count previously. The 3 games that I played this period were all solo games. So if you own the game and you're curious about the solo mode, you can go on to Board Game Geek. There was, I think it was a non-official solo mode that was originally created, and then the publisher got involved and it sort of became the official solo mode. So you can find that linked through the forums at Board Game Geek. I've played the first 3 games. I succeeded at the first 2 games. I think there are maybe 8 or 10 games in what could be structured as a campaign, but essentially you're just playing through a bunch of scenarios. There's a little thematic feeling for each one, and when you start the campaign, when you start the first game, you will have very little access to the different kinds of industries. So you're kind of operating within a much smaller sphere. And it is kind of based on a developing community. So as you proceed through the campaign, you will have access to more and more of the industry tiles that you'll want to be building, and you'll be able to do more and more things, and the gameplay will get more and more complex as you add in all of these other elements. It was a little odd because the first couple games are so limited, and there are very specific things that you need to do and really not that many ways to do it. So I kind of blew through the first 2 games in the solo campaign, and then I lost the 3rd game. I think this is a campaign that I will probably go back to and finish playing and complete. I'd like to see the whole campaign, but I think beyond that, it's probably not a solo mode that I'll return to in the future. Now, the future of Anno 1800 with me in my collection is also a little bit in question. I've played it at a 2-player count. I know that's not really the ideal player count. It's supposed to play best probably at max player count of 4. I am planning on playing Anno again this Sunday when I have a couple of friends over, so we'll be playing it at the 3-player count. and I'll see how it fares there. I will say, though, in general, the game's designed by Martin Wallace, who's a designer that I really love. He designed Age of Steam, Railways of the World, the Brass games, Australia, Wildlands. I generally really like Martin Wallace games. And you may also know that Anno 1800 is an adaptation of a video game that is essentially a simulation type game. Now, the board game does incorporate that feeling of a simulation very well, but that also means that you feel like you are just kind of pushing cubes around and building tiles on your player board. The game can be very, very long because it takes one player running out of their hand of cards to trigger the end game, and so many actions that you're doing in this game will cause you to pick up more and more cards. I think ultimately that so far is my problem with the game. I don't mind the gameplay, I enjoy it somewhat, but I just don't think that there's enough gameplay in the gameplay to last for these 3-hour games. These are very long games for what the mechanics in this game is. And I think if the game played in an hour, hour and a half, I'd enjoy it more and I'd be more willing to keep it in my collection. It is different than any other games that I have. I do kind of enjoy the gameplay, it's just so long. So I think I will need to see it at 3 players, maybe at 4 players, and ultimately I'll decide if this is a game that I want to keep. I think it's a game that I will enjoy playing again from time to time. I'll just ultimately need to decide whether that means keeping in my collection. You know, if it's a game that I only really feel I need to play once every year or two, it may not be worth keeping in my collection as my collection continues to grow and get bigger and bigger and sort of overwhelm the space that I have in my townhouse. But I do like the game. I'd say right now it's coming in for me probably around a 7 or a 7.5. Let's call it a 7.5 for now. I also played Descent: Legends of the Dark, which has kind of been a contentious game this past year. It had art that people found out about way before the game released, and the art was very divisive. Personally, I don't really like the art style in the game. I would almost have any other art style, but that's not really going to stop me from playing the game. This art style that you find really on the player boards and some of the cards is so non-essential to the game. Really, most of what you're doing in this, because it's a Descent game and it's a dungeon crawler, is that you're using your miniatures to move around a map. You expand the map as you play. There are some miniatures that will come into the game. There are also terrain, some of which is cardboard. There's even a big cardboard dragon, and there's also a dragon in miniature form. So I think that when you get to the end of this campaign, you are going to possibly encounter the miniature form of the dragon, and then, I'm guessing, as you get into the fight with him, he will eventually kind of assume his final form, which will be this huge dragon that comes up through maybe the floor of the dungeon, and that's, I'm guessing, when you're going to bring out this cardboard dragon that's kind of just the top half, but it's very big. Now, I only played the first scenario, and it is very app-reliant, app-dependent, so you need to use the app to play it. My fiancée Kristen had just gotten a new iPad around Christmas, so we were using that iPad along with a friend of ours, so there were 3 of us playing the game. I think I've heard it's best at 4, but it played fine at 3. One of the interesting things about this campaign is that when you first start the game, you have access to 4 characters, and then later on, you'll get access to 2 additional characters. So whenever you play the game, you're going to have access to 6 characters. Now, all of these characters, from what I can tell and from what I've read in the rulebook so far, is that they will level up together. So this won't be a case of if you play one character and you really start leveling that character up, you're not going to want to, later in the campaign, work with another character because that character will be, less powerful. All the characters, it seems, level up together. The game also encourages you to play different characters throughout the campaign. So you might play one character one scenario, and then maybe it's the tanky type character, and then maybe the next scenario you decide you want to play a ranged character. So this is not the case where you're going to have one character that you're going to stick to throughout the campaign. This is a case where you're going to have a party, and then every time you play the game, you're going to choose a character from that party to play, and it can be different every adventure, which means the character that I play during one scenario might be the character that my friend Ryan plays the next time we play, the next scenario out. And maybe I play his character, maybe we swap. I think that's a really interesting idea, and it's facilitated by the fact that the characters level up equally. But it allows the players to have different experiences, to play different kinds of characters throughout the campaign, and I'm thinking it may actually give all of the players more of a feeling of ownership or agency over the entire party, because theoretically, they can and maybe should be playing all of the characters over the course of the campaign. So if you touch some of the characters throughout, maybe you have favorites you come back to more than others, but if you give each of the characters at least one play over the course of the campaign, theoretically, I'm thinking, you might feel more connected and responsible for the entire party. Now, our first scenario took a few hours, and it functions very much like something like Mansions of Madness. There was less going on in our game than Star Wars Imperial Assault, which I know uses the Descent model, but does it in the Star Wars universe. And I've played an entire campaign of Star Wars Imperial Assault before, so I know how that works. It did feel like there were less mechanics in this one, although that could also be partly because this was our first scenario. So it's possible that more mechanics will get added in as we play. There's a really cool mechanic in Descent where you have a weapon and you can either take on fatigue onto your weapon or on your character to allow you to do extra bonus things. And then one of the actions that you can take is to flip that weapon over. And when you do, if you have fatigue or any other negative effects on that weapon, they will fall off. So it allows you to reset your weapon to a different weapon. And every player has one sleeved card. They give you 8 sleeves in the game, just a total of 8. And the idea is that each character will have 2 weapons that they can flip back and forth. So you get a sleeve so that you can put your weapons in the sleeve and just kind of more easily flip them back and forth without your cards kind of spilling everywhere. It's an interesting mechanic. It does take an action to do that flip, so when that happens, you're not doing anything else. So you want to make sure that you're timing those well. You don't really want to have to flip your weapon over in the middle of a very troubling combat, because you'll lose a turn and then you may get attacked a lot and take some damage while that's happening. But I do like the extra options that gives you in sort of navigating between 2 weapons and also allowing you to take on this fatigue to do extra abilities with your weapons. Now, I have a lot of campaign games, and my goal is to play many of these campaign games on the Twitch channel, which I am planning on launching before the end of the year. However, the reality is that I just have way too many campaign games to be able to play all of them and to be able to produce all of the content. So I am now starting to say with my fiance and a few of my friends that if we want to play certain campaign games, we're just going to go and we're just going to start playing them, and I will certainly be talking about them in these videos. But not every campaign game will probably have the time to get played on the channel. So it would seem that Descent Legends of the Dark is going to be a campaign that gets played and completed before the Twitch channel gets launched. So if you want to hear more about it, just keep showing up for these videos. We really enjoyed the first scenario. We thought it gave us a lot of options in how to do things, and it just felt like a really good miniatures campaign experience so far. Now there's 16 scenarios in the game. Each one is, let's say, about 3 hours, I think. And I'm planning on playing maybe 3 scenarios a month. So it will take about 6 months probably for me to get through this campaign. And I probably will be playing about 2 to 3 scenarios a month over the next 6 months. So you'll be hearing about it piecemeal from time to time as we proceed through. And I'll let you know how it develops, how our enjoyment of it continues to change, either for the better or for the worse. But so far we really like it, all 3 of us, and I'm really looking forward to playing more. I'm even anticipating maybe the next time we get together to just play Descent Legends of the Dark and try to get in 2 scenarios. But we'll see how that goes. So for now, after just having played the 1 scenario, I think my rating of the game so far is probably about an 8.5. But keep in mind that's after 1 scenario, so it's probably very likely that will change over time. Whether that goes up or goes down, I don't know. But for now, I'm giving it an 8.5. I've played 4 more games of Role Player Adventures. This is a 12-episode campaign that I'm playing with just myself and my fiancée, Kristen. We have now completed through the 7th scenario, and we're planning on playing the 8th scenario later today. So I think that game will get finished within probably the next week, maybe 2, depending on what happens with the video series that I'm doing and if I need to dedicate a lot of time just to that and push everything else aside. But for the next week and a half, my focus is on completing that video series, the top 100 most anticipated games of 2022, and completing the campaign for Role Player Adventures. Now, I've talked about this game before. I don't want to talk about it too much. Kristen and I are really enjoying the campaign and the story. We like the choices that we're getting to make as players. I will say, though, that it seems like there are not a lot of choices that will change the campaign that much. So your choices may affect the window dressing a little bit of the campaign, but you still are playing a narrative, scripted, on-rails campaign. So your choices don't really affect the outcomes that much. And that's something that I've felt from the beginning. I still feel that going into the second half of the campaign. You'll have to stay tuned and see what I think about that when we actually finish the campaign. There is a legendary mode for the game, so right now I'm considering, after we finish our campaign, holding on to the game and then maybe eventually playing the legendary mode on the Twitch channel. But I do think that there's not going to be that much replay in the campaign, and other than that, it may not be a game that I hold on to. I really enjoy it, but gameplay-wise, you're really just doing one thing other than the choices that you make, which is to do dice mitigation puzzles when you need to do skill checks, and slightly different dice mitigation puzzles when you are in combat. So those 2 things are really all that you're doing in the game besides kind of making narrative choices. It's a fun game. We're really enjoying the story of the campaign and going through it. I just don't see that there's going to be a lot of replay built into this game. So for me, I think because of that, and because of the very simplified type of gameplay, I'm probably going about a 7.5 on it right now. And some of that 7.5 is buoyed by how much we're enjoying the campaign. If we weren't enjoying that campaign, it would probably be a little lower, maybe a 7. And part of the reason for the downpull on the rating is just because of the similarity of the mechanics and the fact that you're really just doing 1 or 2 things over and over and over. So we are enjoying it. It is very samey. It does feel like a limited kind of game, both in the story and in the way it uses its mechanics, which may get samey and a bit tired when you're doing it over and over and over. I think that for us, the 12 scenario campaign will be just about perfect, and at the end of the campaign, we'll probably be ready to sell the game and move on, unless I decide to hold on to it with the idea that I may eventually do the harder legendary mode on camera for a Twitch audience, which would be a lot of fun. The 4th game that I played this period is called Stockpile. This is one of the games that I needed to get played for my 2020 list, but this one is a game that existed previously. So the version that I got, that I helped kickstart, that was delivered in 2020, is the Epic Edition. When I played the game recently, I just played the base game, so it's very no frills. My scoring of that version of the game is not that high, probably about a 6.5. It just is a very simple stock manipulation game where you're buying and selling stocks. Stocks can split, they can go bankrupt, and everything you're doing is just kind of hedging your bets for the long game, and you're trying to get the most money. Now, there are about 4 different modular expansions that you can throw in. Some of that includes investor cards, which gives you variable powers. And then there are several different modules that add different gameplay mechanisms into the game and make it a little more complex and give you some more choices and different things that you can do as a player. I am looking forward to using all of those, to trying out all the different modules. And I think that for me, ultimately whether or not I keep the game will depend how much I like the Epic Edition with kind of everything thrown in. I am very good at these kinds of stock manipulation games and bluffing games. I tend to play them very well and win a lot, but but that doesn't mean that I really enjoy them that much. That's an interesting thing with games, right? You may be really good at a certain type of genre, but not really enjoy it that much. So I need more out of this game for it to be a keeper for me personally, and I need to get it played with the different modules to see if that makes it worth keeping for me. Otherwise, the game is just too simple. There's just not enough going on for me to keep it around. But I plan to check out those different modes soon. Definitely not until I finish the video series and the Role Player Adventures campaign. But after that, I'll probably sit down with Kristen and we'll play some different modes of the game, throw in different expansions, and ultimately see how we both feel about keeping it. But for now, I think I'm going to keep the base game rated about a 6.5. So that completes the played games this period. Now I want to talk to you about the currently running crowdfunding campaigns. The first of these is called Blazon, and it's going to complete its funding on Wednesday, January 19th. Now, I'm running a little late getting this video produced because of the video series that's kind of taking more of my attention right now. I do plan on getting this edited and posted tonight, Tuesday night. So if you happen upon this video in the first 12 to 24 hours of it premiering, and Blazon is something that is interesting to you, I would encourage you to run over to Kickstarter and check it out, because it's only going to be running for the first maybe 24 hours of this video being up. After I finish the video series, future editions of the Kickstarter Weekly should be premiering on Fridays for the following week, so there shouldn't be an issue moving forward with these videos coming out a little bit too late for some of the campaigns. Hopefully this is the last video that will be an issue for. Now, Blazon had a minimum required funding goal of $15,000. They're currently sitting around $58,000, which is just under 4 times that minimum required funding goal. Blazon is a game for 2 to 4 players. It plays in about 30 to 60 minutes. It looks like the complexity on this game is going to clock in around medium light, and we're going to set the risk on this campaign at medium low. Now, if you're wondering what kind of game this is, well, it's a hand management game, it's a resource management game, and it's a set collection game. And essentially what players are doing is they're building a shield, or you could also consider it kind of a family crest. So Blazon is actually a word that is referred to kind of the showing of your shield, or the creating of your shield. It's about the different things that you are displaying on this shield, which I think for a long time, going back centuries into history, families have used kind of this shield as their family crest. So I'm thinking of it personally not just as a shield, but as a family crest. And when you're playing this game, whichever thing you want to refer to it as or think of it as, players are trying to make their shield more unique by getting different kind of elements and putting it on the shield and using the resources to do that. It's all about creating the most unique shield. It's a very interesting little game. It's very unique, it's colorful, and I don't think we've seen another game quite like this, certainly with this kind of theming. Now, it's designed by David Conklin, and this is his first published game. But it has art by Ian O'Toole, who is a prolific artist, one of my favorite, and he has done art on games like Age of Steam, The Gallerist, Lisboa, On Mars, and Vino's Deluxe Edition. It's also being published by 25th Century Games, who has put out games like Kohaku, Ra, and Space Explorers. Now, there's 2 different versions of this game available through pledges. So if you pledge $25, you can get the regular edition of the game. If you pledge $50, you'll be pledging for the deluxe version of the game. The differences between the 2 editions are that in the deluxe version, it will come with some foil accents on the box, so the box will look a little prettier and shinier. There are also 4 abatement tokens and 20 herald tokens in the game. If you get the regular edition, they will be just regular, flat, non-impressive cardboard tokens. If you get the deluxe edition, they will be upgraded to wooden tokens. And then there are also these tokens called achievement tokens. There are 5 of them in the game. Again, in the regular edition, they will be standard cardboard tokens, whereas if you get the deluxe edition, they will be acrylic screen printed upgrades. I don't like to give out a lot of shipping information because it's unnecessary, I think. It's just too much information. But I do like to give out one price, so I do US shipping, and for both versions of the game, US shipping is going to be estimated right now at $13. And finally, 25th Century Games is aiming to deliver Blazon in November of 2022. For our next game, we head over to Gamefound for Rise of the Necromancers. Rise of the Necromancers is going to fund on Friday, January 21st. Now, they had a minimum required funding goal for this campaign of $50,000. They're currently sitting at $242,000, which is just under 5 times that minimum required funding goal. It's a 2 to 5 player game that plays between 45 and 120 minutes. The complexity level on this is also medium light, and we're going to set the risk on this campaign at medium low. Now, Rise of the Necromancers is essentially a dice rolling, dudes on a map game. It's got area control and variable player powers. Now, this is the third go-round for Rise of the Necromancers. So the first time it crowdfunded, it did it over at Kickstarter. It was the base game, it funded, it delivered. Then they did a second campaign for the expansion Dawn and Demons, which added in solo mode and cooperative mode to a game that was otherwise a competitive game. So things are a little different for this third go-round for Rise of the Necromancers. First of all, Sore Loser Games, who was the original publisher, has been joined this time out by Mythic Games, which is a bigger publisher who's done bigger games and kind of has a farther reach. Secondly, this new crowdfunding campaign is for a new expansion. It's called Undead Sea, so it's going to open the game up into water. It has a new board, new lands to discover, new playable necromancers for players to play as, and assistants that players can hire to do things. But this campaign isn't only for that new expansion. There are 2 more expansions baked into this, and they kind of supplement gameplay of the game. And I think this is probably a result of Mythic Games' involvement and wanting to bling out the game and take it to the next level. So the first of those expansions is called Grim Harvest, and it features more than 100 miniatures, and they're essentially going to replace the tokens in much of the base game. So they're not huge miniatures, they are on a smaller scale, but they're going to bling up your game and give you kind of little miniatures for a lot of things that were just tokens originally in the game. And whatever level that you back this at, as long as you get the base game, you will also be getting this kind of upgrade pack to make the base game more involving and filled with nicer components. The second additional expansion is called The Foul and the Wicked, and that will actually give you 22 different miniatures, each one representing a different playable necromancer in the game. So before this, you wouldn't have a character miniature. Now, if you get this pack, you'll be able to always have a miniature to represent your character, no matter what necromancer you're playing as. So in general, it does feel to me that Mythic Games kind of came in, said, we like this game, we want to help publish it, but we want to take it up to the next level, give it more table presence, some nicer components, and that largely seems to be being done by these 2 expansion packs, which add a lot more miniatures into the game and have it functioning on that level of game instead of just tokens everywhere. Now, there are 2 designers on this game. The first is named Thorbjorn Christensen. The second is Christopher Kist. Both of those designers have worked on Rise of the Necromancers throughout the series, including the first base game, but this series appears to be their first published games. Jonas Springborg is the main credited artist for this series. He also worked on the original base game, but he's also worked on games like Dead Zone, Kings of War, and Star Wars Outer Rim. And Mythic Games, who's now on board as a co-publisher, has previously produced such games as Mythic Battles Pantheon, Super Fantasy Brawl, and Time of Legends Joan of Arc. Now, there are 3 different pledge levels for this game. There's also a couple of things that you can get as add-ons, so let's talk about all this. For the Necromancer pledge, which is $79, you're essentially getting the base game, but you're also getting that Grim Harvest expansion, which will add in a lot of miniatures and make the game it will make it pop more. You'll have miniatures everywhere, Also for $79, you can pledge the Old Bones Pledge. And essentially this pledge level is for people who already have the base game. So if you pledge the Old Bones Pledge, you are getting the new expansion, Undead Sea, but you're also getting the Grim Harvest upgrade. So presumably you already have the base game, you will now get an upgraded base game, plus you'll get the Undead Sea. And then the final pledge, which is called Lich, is $169, and this is for people who don't have the game at all. So you'll get the base game, you'll get the Grim Harvest, you'll get the previous expansion, Dawn and Demons, you'll get the new expansion, Undead Sea, and you'll also be getting the Foul and the Wicked, and that's the expansion that gives you all of the character miniatures. So the miniatures for all of the different playable Necromancers. $169 for essentially kind of 5 games. I mean, it's packaged as 5 games. You've got the base game, the 2 expansions, and then the 2 expansions that have a lot of cosmetic additions. That's a fairly cheap price, I think. $169 for kind of 5 different boxes. Now, if you want to buy things separately, the previous expansion, Dawn and Demons, is going to be $30 as an add-on. The Foul and the Wicked, which has all of those Necromancer character miniatures, is also $30 as an add-on. And then the new expansion, Undead Sea, is $45 if you are choosing to add it on. Which means that, say you were going to pledge the Necromancer level, the $79 level that has the base game, plus the Grim Harvest expansion, and then you were to add on those other 3 expansions, the 3 that can all be added on, the price for that pledge level plus the add-ons would be $184, which is $15 more than the Lich pledge of $169. So just by getting that bundle, you're already saving $15 off of their price, which is already lower than it will be when it eventually goes to MSRP. Now, I haven't played this game. I can't really speak to it in terms of how it functions as a dudes on a map game. There are a lot of them out there. What makes this one different is the Necromancer theme to it. So I think if you want to decide whether or not this is a game for you, you probably want to look a little bit closer at the campaign. But I will say that this is probably the best version of the game you're ever going to get. So it has the base game, the 2 expansions, and all of these cosmetic upgrades. So if you do like this game, this is definitely the time to buy it and the time to get the best version of Rise of the Necromancers. And for that, it's a really good deal, this campaign. Now, US shipping, continental US shipping for that Lich pledge of $169 is going to be $22, and Mythic Games is looking to deliver this campaign in September of 2022. From there, we move to the final currently running crowdfunding campaign. This one is back on Kickstarter, and it's called Pierre. This campaign is going to complete its funding on Sunday, January 23rd. They had a very small minimum required funding goal of $5,000. They're currently at about $27,000, which is slightly over 5 times that minimum required funding goal. The game plays 2 to 4 players. It plays in about 1 to 2 hours. It is a heavy Euro game, and because it's really the first campaign run by this publisher, really the first game that they've put out, the risk for this campaign is going to be set at high. Now, initially, I think anyone who takes a look at this campaign automatically thinks viticulture. It is a game about kind of aging the best champagne. So it is similar in theme to viticulture, which is about aging wine. There's also another game out there by Vital de Cerda about wine called Vinhos Deluxe Edition. But this game looks more like viticulture. There's kind of aging of the champagne that feels a little bit similar to the aging of the wine in viticulture, and a lot of the art looks very similar. However, anyone that has actually played Pierre will tell you that the games are very different. They may look a little bit superficial on top, but the mechanisms in Pierre are very different from viticulture, and the game feels very different. However, it still is an economic and planning game. It still is a Euro, leaning into the heavy Euro realm. And it's also got action points and players trying to fulfill contracts, and it's a worker placement game. So it does have some superficial similarities to viticulture. It's designed by the designing duo of Louis Costa and Jose Santos, and both of those designers have worked together previously on Six Castles, Cafe, and Yinzi. And the art is done by Olivier Fagner, who has previously done art on Dream Factory, Escape, and Pit. And James Churchill, who's previously worked on Feed the Kraken, Legacies, and Public Market. And the publisher here is R&R Games. And again, this appears to be their first published game and their first Kickstarter. They're doing things a little bit differently with this campaign, where they've got 3 different pledge levels. The first is just the bare bones version of the game. The second pledge level will include stretch goals, so you won't be getting stretch goals in the first pledge level. And then the third level will include add-ons, which are really just more stretch goals, because they're things that you could add on, but if you pledge that level, you will automatically be getting them. So the first pledge level is for $49. It's called Taster. The second pledge level is for $59. It's called Connoisseur, and that's the pledge level that will include the stretch goals. The third level is $79. It's called Aficionado, and the last time I checked at it, they had $32 in add-ons already included in that, which is more than the increase from the previous pledge level. And one of those add-ons is a big playmat. So presumably that pledge level is very much worth backing compared to the other pledge levels and what you're getting at those pledge levels. The shipping, the US shipping for this game is somewhere between $15 and $20. That's an estimate. And R&R Games is aiming to deliver Pierre in July of 2022. Now that delivery date is soon, so we'll have to see if they actually make that delivery date or not. But I think for a first-time publisher, if they don't already have the game in production, I don't see them actually delivering in July. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and that is what they are currently estimating. So that brings us to the end of that section. Now let's talk quickly about the games that I personally pledged from the last video, which was 2 weeks ago. Now, if you remember, if you watched that video, I profiled 2 different games in that video. One was Call of Kilforth, a fantasy quest game, and the other one was the Palaces of Carrara 2nd edition. I backed both. I went back and forth on how much I should back Call of Kilforth, because you were able to back for the other 2 games in the series as well, Gloom of Kilforth and Shadows of Kilforth, and there are some upgrade packs and promos for each of those games. And it was very possible for that pledge or that series to be very large if you kind of pledged everything. And that's something that I like to do in general. If I have the opportunity to back something and there is kind of previous content, I like the ability to be able to pick it up at the same time. However, I haven't played this series yet. I don't really know how I feel about it. I want to try it out. So for this campaign anyway, I decided to just back the new game, and when it comes, I'll play it, play through the campaign. If it's something that I really like, I may go back and get the previous games, maybe on a future campaign, or just trying to find them, maybe ordering them directly through the publisher. But I didn't go all in and get everything, I just got everything for the new game only. But I'm really excited to try it out. I like the kind of game that it is. It's an exploration game. You're kind of walking around this tableau of cards, and you're going on an adventure and kind of triggering different things. Gameplay-wise, it looks a little similar to me to something like Maximum Apocalypse, but it doesn't have that game's theming. This is more of a straight, fantasy theming, and it also doesn't have that game's sensibility of kind of throwing in the kitchen sink and all these things. You are definitely in Call of Kilforth pursuing a narrative adventure that is within a certain kind of theme and storyline and world. The other game, The Palaces of Carrara 2nd edition, is a new edition of an older game by Kramer and Kiesling. They're really solid designers. I like their design sensibilities, and this is a game that had been sort of out of print for a while, and so it just seemed like this was a good opportunity for me to finally be able to play it, acquire a copy, and I'll see after I get it in and play it if it's something I want to be keeping for the long term. Okay, so let's talk about the 7 games that I've acquired this period, and this actually includes some games that I was gifted over the holidays. The first of these is The Fox in the Forest. This is something that I was aware of previously, and I'd thought about getting it to play with my fiancée Kristen. It's a trick-taking game, so it's kind of like Rummy, but for 2 players, and it adjusts the scoring a little bit with its theme. It looks like a really fun, simple game. We haven't played it yet, so once I do play it, I'll have a better idea if it's something that I want to keep. But I think either way, I probably will keep it because it was given to me as a gift, and I think that Kristen will really like it. So I know it's a game that we'll be able to take with us when we travel and sort of pull out and play in a hotel bed, or, you know, just at a function if we're, you know, somewhere sitting out on a lawn, maybe at a movie screening. It's the kind of game that we could just play on the blankets. So I think it's always good to have a half dozen or dozen games like that that are portable and feature a smaller gaming experience that you can create for yourself on the go as needed. I also got Glass Road, which is the new edition that's being published by Capstone Games. If you've been watching some of my videos lately, you've probably heard me talk about how Capstone has now become my favorite retail publisher. Everything they're putting out is just amazing and really well produced, smartly produced. Doesn't necessarily have a lot of fat on it, but the components are really good and just well designed for what you need for a retail game. I'm loving everything that Capstone is doing. Now, Glass Road is an older Uwe Rosenberg game. It's been out of print. Again, this was my opportunity to pick it up. I really do like Uwe Rosenberg games, so for this one, I'm not really considering, you know, playing it and selling it. This is something that I'm anticipating will stay in my collection for a long time. And I'm very excited to finally have this game, to have a new version of it published by a great retail publisher, and it even came, I think, with some promos. I also had Hansa Teutonica Big Box be delivered. That for me was a game that had been out of print for a while. I'd heard really good things about it. I just wasn't able to find it out there in the wild. And so when they did a big box version, I knew it was my opportunity to get not just the game, but the game with all of the stuff that was now being included in one version. I haven't played it yet, and the reality is I'm trying to play a lot of games from 2020 so that later in the spring, probably in March, I can do my top 30 games of 2020. Then I need to get some 2021 games played and put out that list later in the year, probably in the fall. And of course, I have new games coming in that I want to play, and ultimately be able to do first impressions videos for when they're fresh and they're new. Now, the Hansa Teutonica Big Box is essentially a 2020 edition. So that becomes one more thing that I need to add onto my 2020 list to get played. So I will be playing it soon. I almost definitely will not be doing an initial video for it because it is a later edition of an older game. It's not super fresh. But I do want the ability to include some of these newer versions of later games when I do my top 2020. I probably won't include them on the list proper, but I'll have little exceptions of where they would fit in if I was including them on the list. So I do want to get that played. It also means that the number I'm going to be showing you guys at the very end of this video is going to go up again because Hansa Teutonica is now added to that list. The Loop is another game that I just acquired that is also from 2020, so it becomes another game that I need to get played before I do that top 30 of 2020. Now, this one has very bright and colorful characters. You're doing things like traveling through time and using cards to create different kinds of inventions and things to solve puzzles with. There is kind of a campaign to it where you can play through a bunch of different scenarios, but really it just feels like a very colorful puzzle game that you're kind of playing as a campaign. I am very much looking forward to it, so much so that even though I haven't played it, I did include the expansion on my list of 50 most anticipated expansions coming. That expansion was supposed to be released in 2021, but like a lot of things, it's been pushed to 2022. So as soon as we finish Role Player Adventures, the very next kind of campaign-y game on the list is The Loop, followed by My City. And both The Loop and My City need to get played because they are on that 2020 list. Merchants of the Dark Road is the new Brian Sewer game. He did Coldwater Crown, Freshwater Fly, and he's a designer that I have very much my sights on. I'm really liking a lot of his stuff, and I think he's getting better and better as he goes. It was published by Elf Creek Games, and it just looks really, really good. I'm very excited about this one. And this is one of the games I have earmarked to play as soon as I can once I get through that 2022 video series. but it looks like a very cool take on the worker placement genre with some really nifty art. Strawberry Sunset is a tiny little card game that I got for the holidays as a stocking stuffer. It's essentially a tableau builder, and you're basically building, I think, strawberry patches, and the way that you do that is linked to kind of how you play the cards together. I anticipate it being a very simple, very light, not too compelling game, but something that's super portable and it can be taken almost anywhere. And from what I've seen of the game, there actually are some good choices in it to be had. So I'll have to report back when I do get that played, and because it's such a small game, it's likely that it'll get played soon, just slipped in with other things. It definitely is kind of a filler game. And then finally, by a friend, I was given Unmatched Deadpool. We played some Unmatched together. He really enjoyed it. I'd been talking about some of the characters, and I think he went and picked up a base set. I believe he picked up Battle of Legends Volume 2, and there were a few different copies of Unmatched Deadpool at the store where he bought it. And so he picked up one Deadpool for me and one for him. I really like Unmatched a lot. I haven't had a chance to try out Deadpool yet, but I think he's going to be a very fun character to play, and hopefully the next time that I do play Unmatched, I'll get to work him into the gameplay. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully there's some information in there that will help you with the 3 games that you may want to look at and consider backing this period. I'll be back in less than a week to tell you which of those games, if any, I personally backed. And if you haven't yet, check out the series that I'm currently producing. 8 videos, my top 100 most anticipated games of 2022, as well as my 50 most anticipated expansions and later editions of games that have already existed. Have a great week. Play lots of great games, and I will see you all very, very soon. Take care.